Hello, I'm Margaret Murray, and I'm an LPC and an LMFT, which means Licensed Professional Counselor and Licensed Marital and Family Therapist. Pastor Tom Felder asked me to talk today about grief and the holidays. I've been a psychotherapist for 33 years, a little more, and have worked with a lot of people who were experiencing grief and loss, and then the holidays. So we'll talk about it in the context of today, COVID time, which is kind of exponentially harder. First, I want to say a few things about grief, period, anytime, and then we'll talk about the holidays. Grief is hard. It's work. It's likely that all of us have and will experience grief, loss, multiple times and to varying degrees in our lifetime. And the holidays can bring back the memories and the feelings, and it can become almost overwhelming. So let's talk about normal responses to grief and loss. Just so you'll know what you're feeling is normal, and really almost anything you feel is normal. There's not a prescribed process through grief. It is very individual and very hard work. Some typical ones are numbness. You feel kind of a deadness inside, a feeling of tightness maybe in your chest, heaviness. You may change what you eat or when you eat or how you eat. Life is just so different without the loved one. You may have difficulty concentrating, feeling restless, can't focus, can't finish tasks. This happens to all of us sometime, but it can intensify. You go into a room and then try to remember, now why did I come here? And you may never remember why you came into that room, or you may remember when you go back into the other room. Change in sleeping habits. You may wake up at odd times or go to bed at odd times, and for a while that's okay. It's just a matter of adjusting to the loss. Feeling angry toward God, toward the person who left, toward friends or family who are not being very supportive or being supportive in the way that you want them to be. It's an adjustment, and you don't even know what you need or want sometimes. Feeling abandoned, sometimes feeling abandoned by God, but certainly feeling abandoned by the loved one, and maybe by family or friends who are also dealing with their own grief. And everybody deals with grief differently, and so they may distance themselves from you because they don't want to see your grief, or that your grief triggers their grief, or they don't know what to say and they don't want to make it worse. But it still can leave you feeling lonely and alone when you need them the most. Feeling guilt or regret over things you didn't say or you did say, or experiences you did have or experiences you didn't have with the loved one. It's normal to dream about the loved one. It's also normal to not dream about the loved one. It's just whatever comes is what comes in our dreams. We don't have control of that. And it's helpful and important, and maybe even you have a sense of needing to tell and retell the story of what happened, how your loved one got sick and went to the hospital and then 3 days was just gone, or how the grief, the illness progressed over months. However the story developed, it's helpful to tell it and to retell it. You'll probably have good days and bad days, and that's normal. You may have sudden mood changes, and for someone like me, this is very common. Tears at unexpected times. When I was practicing this, as I got near the end of it, I could feel myself becoming tearful just talking about grief and at another level connecting with some of my losses. And so tears are really healing and a gift from God, although we don't look at them that way very often. When we experience the death of a loved one, there are more losses than just that loss. We lose some joy for a while. Our beliefs may be challenged. They may be changed or different or We feel somehow tricked by our believing what didn't happen. Our dreams for the future may be changed. Our expectations have changed. Our support may be different than what we would have expected or anticipated around the loss. Plans, community can be different. Most of what we may have experienced when our loved one was with us as a couple, say. And now that they're gone, we're different in our community of support network. Plans have changed, and they're probably, some of them will never happen now because of that loss. Motivation. We may not have much motivation to clean, who likes to clean house anyway, and when there's no one else there to see it or likely to come by, it's kind of a COVID experience too. Why clean house? Or why take a shower? Or why do my hair? Or why put on good clothes? There's just a real decrease in motivation at times when we go through a loss. We've lost a best friend, perhaps. The rhythm of life may change. Our typical morning of getting up and doing devotionals together and then eating breakfast and then cleaning up and then whatever the routine was, it's totally changed now because it may be just you. There are other losses that are devastating also, in addition to losses of a spouse. Loss of a child, of a grandfather, of a grandchild. All of those losses affect us very deeply, and these qualities that I'm talking about right now can be part of our process post the loss. One of the things that seems particularly relevant to losing a spouse is someone to make last-minute plans with. When you have a spouse, you can say, "Oh, you want to go eat at the Mexican food place tonight?" And typically they will say, "Yeah, let's do." But if you don't have someone living in your house, you may have to call 3 friends before you can find one who is free to go with you, or you may not find someone. And so either you end up staying home alone or you go eat alone. And that can be very painful, a powerful reminder of the loss. So it's important to talk about the loss as much as you need to. And that's even more important during the holidays. Holidays just bring back all kinds of memories from the past. Some of them are really, really happy, good memories, and then some of them are painful memories from the past. But talking about any kind of experience helps us to kind of adjust to it, kind of incorporate it into our sense of being, and we're able to move through the grief. It's good to have several friends with whom you feel safe to talk about it. You might wake up some morning and just really need to talk about your loved one who's no longer here. And so if you have 2 or 3 people you could call. You also may need to teach your friends what you need from them. Often friends want to make you feel better, and so they say really kind of platitudes that just make you feel worse. And so to tell them, that's really not helpful. What I need from you right now is, and to give them some examples of the kind of responses that would be helpful to you, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, that sounds really hard," or "I don't blame you, I can see how you would feel that way." Just something that validates what you're feeling and not trying to take it away. A man by the name of Dr. Alan Wolfelt, Wolfelt, has written a Mourner's Bill of Rights, and I want to share those with you. There are 10 rights that a mourner has in the grieving time, and one is you have the right to experience your own unique grief. No two are alike. If I've lost a spouse and you've lost a spouse, it's still two very different things, because my relationship with my spouse was very different than your relationship with your spouse. And so the loss feels very different. And there's nothing that you should or should not feel. There are some things that you should not do, like feel so sad or down that you want to hurt yourself. That's a sign you need to get help. But anything short of that is okay. The second right is you have the right, and I would say the imperative need, to talk about your grief. It may be helpful to have several friends. I just mentioned this, with whom you can talk. It helps you to heal. You also have the right to not talk about it. If a friend brings it up, you want to not talk about it at that particular time or with that particular friend, you can say, I'm just not up to that right now. Let's talk about something else. You have the right to feel a multitude of emotions. There is not a prescribed process of emotional experiences that will help you heal. They just come as they are, and it's okay for you to feel them. It can be confusion, disorientation, fear, guilt. Anger is very typical and is not wrong, and so don't let anybody tell you shouldn't feel angry. You have the right to be tolerant of your physical and emotional health, to be very aware of what will be too much and what will be re-energizing to you a little bit. So respect what your body tells you. And if you need to rest, let yourself rest. If you need to cry, let yourself cry. Tears are really healing. Many of us grew up being told, now don't cry. Don't cry. And so we say that unconsciously even to ourselves. But it is okay and healing to cry. You have a right to experience your grief bursts. Those are, all of a sudden you just feel this intense experience of loss. Unexpected. It just comes and falls over you, and it's okay to feel that. It can be frightening, but it is normal. You have the right to make use of ritual. I don't think generally speaking, in our context, anyone would try to talk you out of a funeral, but some contexts people would. They would say it's not necessary, it just makes the grieving more difficult, and that is really not true. Any kind of ritual that you care to create to remember and to honor your loved one is a good thing to do. And a funeral also helps you provide you with the support of caring people. Sometimes people come to funerals that you haven't seen in a long time, and you remember how important your loved one was to them also, or how important you are to them also. So if someone tries to talk you out of it, don't listen. And you have a right to embrace your spirituality in whatever way is good for you. Faith can be very sustaining during this time, and so to allow yourself to draw from that faith and from that relationship with God is really important. And if you feel angry with God, that's okay. God understands that. I was thinking as I was working on this, some of the people who have made me angry were most angry were some of the people whom I loved the most. And we still have a relationship. We worked through the anger, and God is not going to shut you out because you are angry with Him for allowing your loved one to die. You have the right to search for meaning, to give meaning to this process of grief, however that happens. It's okay to ask questions like why, and why did he die, and why now, and why didn't you answer my prayers. The why questions are great questions, and yet they never have good enough answers. There's no way that there's a good enough reason for a loved one leaving you other than it relieves their suffering, but that's their suffering. It doesn't do much for your suffering at all. And so it's really a good question to ask, but there's not a good answer. Just remember that. Sometimes you may have answers to some of the questions, but not very many of them. And also, over the years, my husband's a minister, and over the years, we've been around a lot of funerals and losses that were just almost unbearable. Children, adult children, little children, and people say the most hurtful things meaning to be helpful. Cliches that are not true. Well, God needed them in heaven for something, or heaven's richer now that they're there. That may be true, but when you're grieving, that is not a helpful thing to hear, and so just kind of let it go on by. Don't take it in and think that you should be feeling better now. And in fact, it often stirs anger in a person. I've seen that happen. And makes them not like God. If God needed them, well, I needed them, so why would God take them? So you have a right to treasure your memories. The legacy that our loved ones leave with us are the good memories. And so hang on to those. Maybe even write them down and share them with kids or grandkids. My father-in-law wrote a kind of autobiography in his later years, and one of my granddaughters particularly really enjoys reading that autobiography of him. And I think there are things I wish I had asked my in-laws, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and my parents before they died, but I didn't think about it. And so maybe writing what you wish your kids or grandkids to know when you're grieving, or wish you had known about the person who is gone, can bring you some comfort, some memories of them, some fun times and some challenging times that you had together. And you have a right to move toward your grief and heal. Reconciling grief will not happen quickly, and you have a right to take as much time as you need. Be tolerant and patient with yourself, knowing that this is a hard thing you are doing, and it's okay that it doesn't happen. No study that I'm aware of says you should be finished with grief in 2 years. In fact, I have worked with folks who came to counseling for a year expecting the second year to be better because somehow we survived the first Christmas, we survived their first birthdays, our first anniversary, whatever first it was, we survived those, and now the second year should be better. But what they have learned is the second year is sometimes harder. They weren't expecting it to be so, and so it kind of surprised them. And yet most of them indicated that they were able to recover from that, the shock of that loss being so powerful again more quickly because they had been through it once. But the second year is still hard, and the third year is hard, and the fourth and the fifth year may be hard. Grief is hard work, and it takes as long as it takes. So briefly, normal grief has many ways of being present with us. Normal grief can respond to comfort and support from others, can be openly angry, connects the depressed feelings to loss. Normal grief says, I really feel depressed, but I know it's because I've lost someone. Normal grief, one can still experience some moments of happiness and joy. Normal grief has feelings of sadness and emptiness, may have transient physical complaints. I learned from one of the folks that I worked with, she got up one morning to fix breakfast and went back to call her husband, and he was gone. And she was totally shocked. He had not been sick. And she had, a few months after his death, she had some heart issues, went to the doctor, and they couldn't find anything really significantly wrong, and he diagnosed it as broken heart syndrome. And that apparently is a real diagnosis, broken heart syndrome. And sometimes that's what we feel when we lose someone that's very close to us. Healthy or normal grief expresses guilt over some of the specifics of the loss. Why did I say that the night before she died? Why did I not stay here by their side instead of going home to catch a quick nap? Why did? And there's no good answers to that either, but it is a normal part of the grief. And it can have a temporary impact on one's self-esteem. If it's a spouse especially, or a child, you've been so much a part of that life, a child that still lived at home especially, and when that's gone, it's kind of like, I'm not sure who I am or what I can do or what I'm capable of, because it's always been me and that's a huge adjustment. How to know if it's clinical depression and if you might need to see a therapist or a psychologist or a doctor. And let me just stop a second. A therapist, which is what I am, has a master's degree that he prepares them to do counseling. A psychologist has a PhD, which prepares them to do counseling. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor who can prescribe medication, who might be able to identify any other medical issues and make a referral to the appropriate specialty doctor. So you could see a therapist and they would be able to help you determine, do you need to see a psychiatrist? In Oklahoma City, which is where I live, seeing a psychiatrist is typically a pretty long wait. And so regular medical doctors, family practice medical doctors can prescribe psychotropic meds, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. And a therapist can help you to decide if that might be helpful to you and what to say when you go see your medical doctor. Anyway, clinical depression is if the person cannot accept support, isolates, rejects, pushes people away for a very long period of time, is irritable and complains but does not directly express anger, exhibits a pervading sense of doom, kind of life is over for me too. That's not a good sign. Projects a sense of hopelessness and chronic emptiness. Many physical complaints. A generalized feeling of guilt that just hangs on and on and on. And a deep sense of loss of self-esteem. If these qualities persist, then it is important that if it's somebody that you know and love who's going through the grief process, that you help get them to see a therapist or a doctor who can evaluate for medication. Okay, so now let's think about some ways to manage the holidays and not become overwhelmed. And that's a great talk when you're not experiencing grief. But when you are experiencing grief, you're close to the edge of being overwhelmed many times a day or week or month. And so the holidays can just become too much. It's the biggest holiday of the year and the most present. It's everywhere. My neighborhood is already... Well, this is like 2 days before Thanksgiving when I'm recording this, and my neighborhood is already putting up Christmas lights. Hobby Lobby has had Christmas stuff on half price for a couple, 3 weeks now. I haven't yet, well, I don't listen to the radio much, so I don't know if they're playing Christmas carols or not, but I'm sure they must be because, and it's not a bad thing totally because Christmas brings joy. And goodness knows, in this COVID time, we do need some reminder that there is joy. But if you're grieving, it can almost be like scraping your fingernail on the chalkboard. It just is too much. It hurts too much. So as you think about and prepare for the Christmas season, here are some things that might make it more bearable for you. Decide how much holiday activity you can be involved in. You don't have to do everything. Actually, that might be less of a guideline this holiday season because unless something really changes, we are going to be encouraged not to do too much holiday activity. But you can decide what you're up for and what you're not. And if you're not up for it, then don't do it. It's okay. Don't isolate, but do say that's too much for me tonight, or let's pass on that this year. If sending out cards is what you typically do and it just is too much, then skip this year. Send 2 or 3 cards if you decide you want to do that, but don't feel like you have to do it because you've always done it. If shopping is too difficult, and it may be this year, especially if you're in the high-risk group, then give gift cards or gift certificates. I don't even know if they make gift certificates anymore. But Amazon online shopping has everything. Every store has online shopping, and you can take care of it that way. Or give money. Everybody loves money. It's not the best meaningful gift, but everybody loves it. I think. I could be wrong, but I think. Meet with family members if like if it's your spouse that is gone, meet with family members and talk about how do we want to manage our painful memories, our good memories, but our painful experience this Christmas. You might not want to do exactly what you've done in the past. Some of the traditions may need to change. Consider honoring your loved one with maybe a picture somewhere prominent, or a special ornament on the Christmas tree, or a time to share funny memories of that person. Laughter is really healing. It can feel irreverent or disrespectful, but it is an important part of the healing of pain, of loss. And remember that some may not have, if you get Christmas cards, they may not have heard about your loss, and so they may address it to you and your spouse, or they may talk about your loved one that you've lost because they don't know, or because they didn't remember when they were doing the cards. And give yourself permission to think about and acknowledge your grief and realize it's okay to have both happy and sad moments. Maybe work out a signal with someone in your family that if you are feeling overwhelmed, you might want to leave the room for a few minutes. And if others are okay with it, talk about your loved one that's gone. That can be so healing to do that as a family. It's pretty important to set physical limits for yourself. Grief is exhausting work. And it is work. So during the COVID time, it's a particular important time to take care of yourself physically. You don't want to, grief lowers your resistance. So, according to what I hear on TV, get a flu shot, which I've done. Wear a mask if you go out in public. Social distance, 6 feet from anybody, and avoid crowds. And so do what you need to do to take care of yourself physically, and as much as you can, meet your emotional need for company also. And that's a tightrope to walk this year. Sometimes families decide to do something totally different than any Christmas or holiday season in the past, and maybe take a vacation to the Grand Canyon. Or I had a family once, after their son was deceased, they decided to go to Disney World. Their son was an adult, but they had not ever been to Disney World, and he had always wanted to go, so they decided to go to Disney World and just do something totally different that first year. And I just remembered that same person that I worked with observed to me, it was uncanny how often in watching TV or watching movies, death came up, and she just couldn't tolerate it for a while, so she would leave. And so there are many triggers to your grief when you're recovering from a loss, and so to know you will unexpectedly be triggered by the most innocent thing on TV, part of some mindless TV show, and all of a sudden there it is. Years ago, a friend of ours was killed by someone beating him with a baseball bat. And this has been 25 years ago, and still my ears are very attuned to when on the TV or in a story of any kind, a baseball bat is mentioned. That comes to my mind. It's just kind of a connection to grief for me. One thing that may be hard this year is when people say Merry Christmas or Happy New Year, because you're not feeling merry or happy, and so it may be difficult for you to respond with that. You might think about just saying thank you and smiling, or saying thank you, be sure and enjoy your family this year, or something that reminds you and them of the importance of being with those you love. Religious services can be reassuring, or they can be upsetting. Only you can decide what is best for you. And if you're going to go to church and cry the whole way through, then there's probably not any real benefit to it. Give yourself some time to heal before you go back to church, if that's what it feels like will happen. On the other hand, going back, you might get so much support and encouragement it would feel very healing to you. Plan something to look forward to in January or February, even if it's small, so that you can have a focus out in the future that helps you to remember this is not all there is. The holiday season won't last forever. And remember, the anticipation of something is often harder and worse than the actual occurrence. Anticipating surgery sometimes is worse than the actual surgery is. So knowing that you can survive this, you're strong and you've gotten through lots of hard things probably, and you will be able to get through this, and you're not alone. If you have faith, then God is with you all the time and understands better than any friend can understand what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. If you feel anxiety and stress and loneliness becoming too overwhelming, it's always okay to ask for help. Call your pastor, call a friend. We don't have to do it alone. And some of us grew up kind of in the environment where you need to do this. Buck up and do it. And that's not necessarily the best way to get through grief. Asking for help can be very powerful and healing. And finally, embrace your treasure of memories. Probably in the last 5 years have I really understood the song that some of you may not even ever have heard of, Precious Memories. I don't care much for the song, but the content of it is very powerful, because what we have when our loved one is gone are those precious memories. And I'm not saying sorry, because it's okay that I have tears when I think about losses. I regret that I'm doing it while we're recording this, but I have precious memories of loved ones, and I'm grateful for those precious memories, just as I'm grateful for those loved ones. So, a few final thoughts. It's wise not to try to create the ideal. It never happens, except in the movies and maybe in books. Life is not ideal. It can be great, it can be good, it can be wonderful, but it's very rarely ideal for more than about 3 minutes. If you get 3 minutes of ideal, you're pretty blessed. And grief is hard work, and stress is hard work, so be connected and aware of what your body is telling you. Our bodies are so kind to us when we listen to it. They tell us you're too tired, you're exhausted, you're too tense, you're too hungry, you're too sleepy, you're not sleeping enough. Our bodies are really our friend, but we tend to ignore them. And so pay a particular attention to what your body is telling you, that if you need to rest, it's okay to say to friends and family, I just don't have it in me tonight or today or whatever. And it always helps to expect stress, to not be surprised by it. Holidays are stressful, and if you can let go of your expectations, it will diminish your stress. Let me say that again. If you can let go of very specific expectations especially, it will diminish your stress. Stress comes powerfully when what we expected doesn't happen. So if we don't expect very much, very specifically, we can hope for and plan for, but if we expect it, then we're setting ourselves up for a pretty significant amount of stress, and this isn't a good time to have a lot of stress. I grew up not with the Beatles, but the Beatles were popular when I was growing up, and I heard their songs, and I was a kid, so I didn't think much about it. But recently I heard one of their songs, and it's really quite powerful. Such a good message. Let it be. If we can learn to let it be, then we'll be much better adjusted people in this world. There's also, in the more current time, my children's time, the movie Frozen. There's this great song about let it go, let it go. It's when we get tense and tight and we hold on to our expectations that our stress level goes up and our enjoyment level just goes down and dissipates. And so to just sort of be able to go with whatever happens is what happens. We don't really get more than a few moments of the perfect holiday picture. I was trying to think of that artist. I thought I did it. The one who paints the perfect holiday dinner, Thanksgiving dinner, turkey, family, all sitting around the table, and Norman Rockwell dinner. That was a painting, and it was a great painting, but it's not a real life experience for very long. It can be for a little bit, but not for very long. And you burn the potatoes, or the turkey falls on the floor. Those are the things that make memories more than the perfect holiday dinner. So in closing, I would say be kind to yourself. Treat yourself as someone you love. You're the only one of you have. And as part of that, I want you to take anything that I said today that caused you to go, maybe not, and let it go. My goal is not to make you feel anything bad or painful or hurtful, but to help you to find a way to be kind to yourself. And blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. We have a great comforter, so rely on him. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for joining us for this seminar on grief and the holidays. If you are experiencing difficulty during this holiday season and would like prayer or to talk with someone, please send us an email to gatewaytalihina@gmail.com or complete our online connection card. You will find a link to the connection card in the description below this video. Gateway Church of the Nazarene is located in Talihina, Oklahoma, and we gather for in-person services each Sunday at 10:45 a.m. We also have a weekly edition of Gateway Church Online, which you can access on our website at www.thisisgatewaychurch.com. Thank you again for spending this time with us, and we hope that you have a wonder-filled and blessed Christmas season.